e-commerce companies maximize their social media presence. I'm really excited to be here tonight and to talk about this important topic.
Correct. And tonight we have Vernell Lamour. Vernell, this is your first time here on the show. I'm sure you're excited, right?
I am excited. I feel outnumbered, but hopefully I can hold my own. My name is Vernell Lamour. I'm also in the marketing space in terms of branding and, digital media. And then by night, I'm a dad, a Haitian dad, proud Haitian dad, of a 4-year-old girl, Haitian girl, and a 2-year-old Haitian boy. So, and I'm also a proud Haitian son. Said I'm proud of my mom. So I'm just happy to be here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone who's tuning in, and definitely a pleasure to sit on this couch, I'll call it, even though we're in 4 different places. But it's a pleasure to sit in the living room and have some dialogue. So I look forward to exchanging.
Yeah. I've known Vernell's mom for many years, and we always have intense conversation about life and issues such as this one, poverty, and how it's impacting our community, not only here, but overseas and other communities as well. And so when she told me, you should have a conversation with my son, he's definitely the type of person who will be interested. I was like, from day one, from our first conversation, right, Vernell? We've been into it. Because, if you are someone who's conscientious, and I believe I'm one of them, if you are someone who cares about the least of these among us, your neighbors, because I always tell people I'm a believer, and I was told that to love God and to love my neighbor, like myself. So as yourself. So how do you not pay attention to the census is saying 13.4%, but I will beg the difference, right? So how do we not pay attention to something as something as disturbing, I would say, as poverty? So what is poverty? When we think about like somebody who's poor, what is poverty? Can we go with Dorothy? How would you define this?
Okay, I define poverty as a mindset, right? Like lack thereof of mindset, or lack of physical things, lack of money, but also, the main root of it is a mindset for me.
Yeah, definitely. It's a mindset, but if it's at the same time too, it's a condition, right?
Right.
So I think Wikipedia said that you can always Google, right? It says a state or condition of lacking enough resources, right? Lacking enough resources or money to meet your standard of living or basic needs, right? So how do you feel about that, the idea of lacking or not having enough resources? Do you think that's the right definition for poverty for those people who are still questioning it, Vernell?
I definitely agree with Dorothy that I think she started off with saying that it's a mental state. And, obviously, if you don't have enough money, I think, well, not all of us, but many of us have been in, at least temporary times when you just didn't have enough to cover whatever it is that you needed, whether you were a student at some point or early in your career or in transition. We've all been in places where there's been a little bit of scarcity. But I think, and I'm going to go out and probably say something a little radical, but I think in this day and age, 2023 in America, if you're in America and you're, in a metropolitan city, whether it be the Bostons, Miamis, Chicagos, I think poverty is 98% mental. It's definitely more on where you are in your head, what your environment is like, and what you think the options are. If you have electricity and access to a smartphone and not even a computer, but a computer's just icing on the cake. Being completely poor, like to the point of like not being able to eat and feed yourself, I would say that it's more of a mindset than an economical situation.
Yeah. So you think that there are options for many folks, especially those who live in metropolitan areas. But, going back again to the social class spectrum, right? They're saying like 13.4% living in poverty. But at the end of the day, can you, Lisa, still be considered poor if you are working and have a paycheck and have access to, like you said, electricity, the internet, and even food, clothing, and all that stuff? What would make someone so nervous about this statistic?
I would say what would make them nervous about it is that I believe it's more people than that number, like the working class poor. So people who have to maybe work 2 to 3 jobs to be able to keep a roof over their head, put food on the table. Those types of things are if they lose that one job, they might be out of a house. They might not have food to eat that night. But I do believe poverty is both a state of mind and also a condition to you not having access to certain things. So not everyone in the country lives next to a metropolitan city with resources available to them. So the people who may be most affected may be on the outside, rural areas who don't have access to great medical health care as well, or access to certain resources. So I think it's both a state of mind and condition. And the working class is the worst.
Yeah, that lack when it comes to food, shelter, water. I mean, going back again to something that you said, I know families who are working 2, 3 jobs and still cannot afford the metropolitan rental market that we have right now in even the state where we live in Boston. Education. If you're not able to afford education, you desire to go to school and you cannot afford it. That's a state of lack, a state of not having enough resources to take care of the things that you want to take care of. So in America, right? Again, going back to something you said, Vonell, in America, we've been told everybody ought to be able to make it. Everybody ought to be able to make that. This is a land of opportunity. Why are so many people not making it then? Why do we have 13?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of factors, right? I mean, I think, there's mental illness. I mean, I think that's something that obviously it's starting to be talked about more and more, but just being sane and being, having, as Lisa mentioned, access to healthcare, but then just the knowledge around how important it is to have mental wellness. So when you see homeless folks, and every big city has a homeless area where everyone's homeless. They're not homeless because they don't have money. I mean, obviously money becomes a symptom, but oftentimes it's a substance abuse or some sort of mental illness and other things. And so we haven't done a good job really tackling those issues. And as a result, if someone's on substance abuse or sort of mental illness, it turns into, whether it be crime, whether it be like lack of being able to keep a job, and relationships, messing up relationships with their family, with friends. So all of it kind of snowballs into, this label of poverty. But I think there's some underlying issues going on. When I speak of the opportunities in terms of it's assuming that, to Lisa's point, that you're not completely rural, you're not completely, segregated from, the hub, and that you do have some level of access to information, to internet, and being able to connect. So I think we live, the thing is that the country, as much as there is that 13%, it's a very generous country, right? We live in a society where the government, if you just look hard enough and you apply hard enough, there's grants, there's all types of social programs, there's all types of, even private people who just donate and give. It isn't this sort of negative place, and it's all about the mindset, right? If you view the world or the country as this terrible, oppressive, the man is against me, this, that, and the third, you're gonna live that. It's gonna become your truth. But if you sort of figure out, okay, you know what? There is a way. Maybe, it's not gonna be easy. It's gonna take a little bit of sacrifice, but as long as I'm willing to put in the work, I'm not gonna, being rich or being super wealthy isn't guaranteed, but getting out of poverty, I don't think is a impossible thing to do in 2023.
It's interesting though, because one of the things I think another post that I posted, I just mentioned it earlier, that I posted a poem by Maya Angelou, right? And Maya Angelou, everybody could say is very respected, thought, a thinker. She was well known. She passed away, of course, but well known poet. And she wrote this poem that I had referred to. I know why the cage bird sings. What are your thoughts about? I had shared that with you all. What does it mean when it says that the cage bird, right? Because Maya Angelou said that the cage bird cannot fly because the cage bird is in a cage, right? In addition to being in a cage, she said that the cage bird's wings have been clipped and the cage bird feet have been tied. What does that mean? Because you just mentioned that this is a land that really provides endless opportunities. I don't know if you said endless, but I'm using that opportunity.
I would say endless, yes.
Oh, okay, endless. So what does that mean though? What would push someone like Maya Angelou to write a poem like that? What do you think, Dorothy?
I don't know. I guess like I said, stemming from mindset, right? And even Vanessa, when you were talking, and I know I'll get back to that, but just kind of saying like how it is a mindset, right? Poverty is a mindset, and then being able, because there are many opportunities, even for myself, right? I knew I was poor when I was sitting up there washing plastic plates and cups, like, you know, but now that I've kind of like did the work and stuff and, you know, kind of educated myself to kind of spring myself forward and move forward, right? And bring myself out of that poverty mindset, even being as a mother, who is a single mother. I have this joke where I say like systematically it's the white man's fault, but unsystematically I make poor choices, right? Or I used to make poor choices. And so when I talk about that, so to tie it in with the poem, right? The birds, I feel like metaphorically, right, is she talking about like, you know, not being able to move due to whether it's the environment or just not believing in yourself or not being able to fly. I don't know. But I just feel like with the bird and being in a cage and stuff, I think like metaphorically she was talking about like the mindset, right? If we can look at it, because the poem could be taken in multiple ways. So for me, as I'm reading the poem and I'm taking it in and I'm just thinking like, okay, the bird has wings, it's clipped, but even though the wings are clipped, it still can do something, right? I mean, other than
But it's in a cage though, Dorothy. If you are in a cage, the poem says a free bird leaps on the back of the wind. The free bird gets to leap on the back of the wind and flows downstream till the current ends. Endless opportunities for the free bird, and dips his wings, swing in the orange sun rays, and dares to claim the sky. Right? The free bird dares to claim the sky, but not the cage bird. The cage bird stall down his narrow gate, right? Can seldom see through his bars of rage. So if you can seldom see through your bars of rage, how can you do something, right? What do you think about that, Lisa?
Well, I would, you know, taking it for what it's saying, you know, not for nothing, there are obstacles put in the way of people who have less access to be able to get access, or they have to jump through more hoops, or to do double the work, or maybe do the same job, not get the same pay, which would lead to generational wealth faster, things like that, which still exists today, you know, in terms of us doing the same job, same education, but I might not get the same pay as someone else. I might even have more of an education than somebody else, and I'm still not getting what I should be getting paid because of a lack of discrepancy. So my dollar, which with inflation is now worth less. That's just like a little example there. So there are things kind of systematically in place where, yeah, you can make it, but it may take a lot more hoop, a lot of mental strength, a lot more than that free cage bird who dares to take the wind, or dares to take the wind, or, feel like they can dip into the sky and do whatever it is that they want to do. Unlike the cage bird, who's not only now mentally trapped, but physically trapped as well. And they have to now really work a little bit harder to try to feel free, or to become free, or create some type of freeness.
Or at least be singing about freedom, because if your wings are clipped and your feet are tied, right? You can only sing. You are doing something, you're singing. That's why we're singing tonight. We're saying that there is something wrong with poverty, and a lot of people are not being given access. And when you're not given access, it is the cage bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown, but long for still. You can still long for it, you can still dream about it, but guess what? Your feet are still tied and your wings are still clipped. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation tonight about poverty. How does it affect us? And how does it affect our reality? And how does it affect society at large? Because being able to understand how it works is very important. Now, this conversation, Dorothy, I was having a conversation with you offline, and you two, Vanel and Lisa, I had posted something online because we said poverty is a social determinant of health. I had posted something online about why so many people dying so young and so suddenly, right? And someone who's a friend of mine said that, that's why I take care of myself and I feed myself. So we just said poverty is a lack of resources, not having access to resources. So how do you, when we on the show here, because we've had the show say health matter, all these things that we're encouraging folks to invest in. What does that do? Are we assuming that everybody ought to be able to do everything that they need? How is poverty affecting our health? And many of the people are dying prematurely. Has poverty, do you know of anybody? Do you have an example of how poverty has affected somebody and have killed them prematurely?
I wouldn't say kill, but I just know working and like the field that I work in, I do a lot of community work. So I've worked at farms and things like that. And just even to see in the urban communities, right? We have, how many times have you all went to the grocery stores and like, oh, this tomato's rotten, or a lot of these vegetables are bad, right? Mm-hmm. And that is because that in the urban community, a lot of these local farms, when they take the good food and they sell it to the, the more richer or nicer areas. And then they literally give the urban communities the ones that aren't as good looking food. So just in that, we're already eating food that has bacteria or will probably mold over, unless then we're having to throw it away. I just threw away so many vegetables. I just had some vegetables and I'm like, why is it molded? And then I'm just thinking like, duh, because where I shop at, where I live at is in an urban community. So we're getting the lesser end or the rotten fruits, literally. So, that's just one example that I can think of off top.
Yeah, it says poverty kills more people in the US every year than cancer and heart disease. So my friend, going back again, she's saying, I'm taking care of myself because I want to avoid cancer and I want to avoid heart disease. Lucky for her, she's probably living in the American dream, not the American nightmare, because the cage bird who cannot fly, who cannot have a decent income, cannot afford to buy good food, as you say, because they live in communities that have been systemically oppressed. Yes, Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to add to that because that requires access, right? So you don't see, I'm just gonna be frank, I can drive to a Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, but what does that require? A car, and for me to have gas. This where Whole Foods is, you might not be able to get there on a bus. Again, if you're not a big metropolitan area, where you can, or with a great transit system, and also the funds, because everything may be a little bit more expensive. So health is wealth, let food be thy medicine. So if you don't even have access to good food, just food which everybody should have access to, then you're putting more processed food into your body. And everything in terms of health, 80% of your health comes from your gut. So what you put inside your body either feeds your body or causes inflammation or viral infections. So therefore, not having those access to good food and you're eating processed junk over time, that will cause sickness. Then you don't have access to good health care. So then now maybe you have to pay out of pocket if your job doesn't give you good insurance. So that leads to poverty that could lead to death. That's how I see it in terms of that aspect right there as an example.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, Volnea, do you want to add something to this? Because the idea of, I love what Dorothy mentioned, like being conditionally, the area where she lives at, or the community that many marginalized and many poor working class families are living in, they don't have the access. So that's why even if they wanted to have the good health that my friend on Facebook had mentioned, they won't be able to have access to it, because in order for you don't see these type of restaurants and this type of whole food supermarkets until the community is getting ready to get gentrified. Meaning like they're pushing out the poor and the working class and the marginalized and taking over the community. What are your thoughts about that, Bonell?
You said a lot there. So okay, well
I'm trying to bring it all in here.
No, I know. I'm trying to, and the way my brain, I got it one thing at a time here. Yeah, I'm a guy, so we have to. You can't move too fast, or we'll get lost in the sauce. But no, I think I agree with what everyone was saying. I think obviously, food does play food does play a big part, and then just I think culture is a big part of it as well, because obviously the type of things like at our cookouts and at our Thanksgivings, the things that we grew up on. I mean, the fried chicken, all the rice, like these things literally are like killing us slowly, right? Killing us softly, little by little. The white rice, everything that we love, that we thought was good home cooked meals, actually are actually the things that are creating the high blood pressure, the diabetes, and all the things that all of our, if it's not us, if it's our aunts, our grandmothers, we all are dealing with. And so when you add that and just plain information, one of my grandmothers passed away from colon cancer. And that's, nowadays people rarely do pass away from that, because that's something that a simple checkup, going to the doctors, and you get a colonoscopy or whatever, and that's something that could get treated and avoided. So culture, information, and as everyone's pointed out, just access to food, and just knowledge, like thinking that, not understanding that certain supermarkets, just because you buy it at a store doesn't make it good, right? Just because it's matter of fact, what we would think is fresh fruit or fresh vegetables, the frozen stuff's actually more healthy, because by the time it gets to the from off the truck, off the farm, and they spray it with whatever they spray it with and all that to keep it looking green and moving it around and touching it, and like you're better off in the frozen aisle, because where it goes straight to the frozen. So there's just little pieces of information that we just we're learning, and we're kind of learning on the job, so to speak, with this generation, because we grew up with I used to eat crazy bowls of Frosted Flakes, or not even Frosted Flakes, the regular store brand cornflakes with a whole lot of sugar in it. And that was a regular meal for me. McDonald's, I mean, I'm old enough where McDonald's was actually a luxury. When I was growing up, like you would go, you got the Big Mac, and that was like, wow, but like those things obviously are not good for you, but you develop these habits, you almost get addicted. To this day, I can't, if I see fries, it's like me and fries, like I have to like stay away.
So going back again to the fact that access to food, and you mentioned like the cultural effect, like how we grew up eating, but also how we grew up eating stemmed from the fact that that's what we had available to eat. I mean, like, who would not choose to go to the Plenty and select the best of the best if you had the option to select the best of the best? If you grew up eating all rice and beans or maybe a little bit of a piece of meat, especially if you're from a certain part of the country or the world, because that's all your parents had too. Yeah, people would say you have food stamps, but many, even the food stamps that card that folks have, they cannot buy any type of foods with them. They're limited. They cannot
Yeah.
go to any
But
stores with
I
them. They're
think
limited. So again,
I think if there was
poverty is killing us.
if there was an overwhelming campaign, I mean, these things are kind of new in my lifetime, like no smoking. I remember when you'd go in places and it would smell like smoke. You know what I'm saying? Like
It just
these,
went overseas though, Lamont.
what was
The
that?
non-smoking here went overseas.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So what I'm
the
saying is,
marketing went overseas.
yeah, but what I'm saying is like basic things that we take for granted now, like smoking, eating certain things that are like nobody would do.
Right.
Not too long ago, you would smoke in a hospital with babies and kids around, and all of that. So I think, we're still trying to sort of shake off some of these habits. And then the other thing from a cultural standpoint, being bigger, because especially if you come from a whatever background, being a little bigger and more weight on you was actually a positive thing. So you'd get forced to, like, kids would be like, if you don't finish your plate, that would be a bad thing. So now you grow up not knowing how to sort of balance your food and, control your appetite, and knowing when you're full and when you're not full, because you feel guilty by being full. So all these things become these like culture things. But I just wanted to quickly comment too on my take on the Maya Angelou's poem. I'm gonna butcher. I'm gonna call it,
I know why the cage bird sings.
Yeah, I don't know why the bird flies, I'll end up saying. So for me, and I think context is everything, right? I think that the poem, the book came out in the 60s, and if you think about what was happening in the 60s, JFK being assassinated, Martin Luther King being assassinated, Malcolm X being assassinated. This is the stuff, the black and white TV of people being hosed down, and Emmett Till, that was a decade before, and she's referencing her childhood, which is even earlier than that. So we're talking about Jim Crow and that era. And if you're growing up in that situation, then yes, you definitely feel like a caged bird, because you can't go anywhere. Like going to certain places can actually cause, can be a life and death situation. But I think it's dangerous to apply that same sort of concept to this day and age, because it almost assumes that you have no options, that once you're in the cage, there is no help. There aren't any resources. There isn't an internet. There isn't a group somewhere that you can meet up and try to learn a few things. There isn't an online course that you can try to pick up a skill or two. There isn't a social media that you can try your comedy out and get up and build an audience, or get some marketing and push your graphics through, or have an online show. What would it take to have this show like this, where you can have infinite amount of users, infinite amount of listeners? So the fact that you have a show, which you don't need a radio station, you don't need a TV station, you don't need cameras, you don't need all the fancy stuff. It's difficult to be in a cage in this day and age, unless we're talking to Dorothy's point, a mental one, because physically and practically, it's that thing. I don't know who coined the term, but like, if you can't run, you walk. If you can't walk, you crawl. Was that Harriet Tubman? Okay, I've heard it said in different ways, in many ways. So it's that principle. And if you mentioned Harriet Tubman, I mean, she was born a slave. She could have freed herself. She came back, picked up more people, went back and forth, back and forth. She could have said, I'm in a cage and I can't, there's nothing I can do. And, but she said, and
well, she was in a cage, but she decided to fight through.
But that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. If you adopt this idea that you're in a cage and there's no way out, you're never going to step off that plantation. You're never going to leave that environment, whether it be mentally or physically. And that's the dangerous part that I feel about with the poem. It suggests to me, at least the way I interpret it, maybe I'm a little cynical about it. It just makes me feel like it's a hopeless bird, right? That just, its wings are gone, its things are clipped, and it has no hope, no help, no hand. And You might as well just sink. And I think in reality, though, it's rarely that case. It's rarely you have zero options, right? There's always some level of like, even if you'd have to beg out in the streets, if you put your hand out long enough in any corner, you're gonna get enough people giving you, change.
But I think on a micro level, when you're talking about interpersonal relationship, of course, if I'm in need and I need help, you all will come and rescue me and help me as much as you can. But when we're talking about a systemic level, where folks are being marginalized and oppressed on a daily basis within the system that we live in, yes, we are in a cage. But go ahead, Dorothy.
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you. Because when we talk, so me moving, I'm originally from Texas. I left Houston. I came up here in Boston maybe about 6 years ago almost. And so when I think back of like, my time in Texas, because everyone's like, oh, well, why did you leave, Texas? And I'm like, unlimited abortions, duh, why not? No, joking. But but in terms of access, right? I feel like Massachusetts, Boston has more access to a lot of resources. I can definitely say that much. Is it still kind of like are we still being marginalized in Boston, in Massachusetts? Yes, but I mean, coming from Texas, and then like Vanessa, as you say, there's a lot of Black people. There's a lot of like crab in the bucket kind of community activities going on. So if you don't know that you are in a cage, everyone is there with you, then how are you supposed to know? They don't have a lot of access to a lot of resources as we would here in Boston. And so, which is why I really appreciate it, which is why I probably have stayed, because everybody's like, why are you here? So I definitely agree. But if you don't have that representation, if you don't have access, if you don't have anyone in leadership, kind of like, if you don't have those options, or if you don't have a knowing of it and know that these options are out here, you can say like, go do the go do the research. But if you don't even know that this is available to you, and they don't make it available to you, a lot of stuff, I'm in the community, which is why I'm like, okay, I have access, versus some people's like, well, how did you get, like, how do you have this, or how do you, because I'm not rich, I work in social work, like I work for a nonprofit, so I'm getting paid pennies, but I love what I do.
But you can be, so here the thing is, you can be rich in social work, you know? So real quick, and I agree with you. So one thing, real quick, let me just quickly say, so the one thing I will agree that everyone's experience is different, right? Coming from Houston, or it's coming from Texas, and then coming from Boston and New York, Chicago, and then West Coast, Midwest, everyone has a different case. And that's my other thing about the poem, is that it makes it seem like everyone's in that one cage in the same exact way. And at the top of the cage.
About the cage bird. The cage bird. That could be you, that could be somebody else, but
every bird has a different kind of cage.
The poem is doing compare and contrast, right? We all know that, compare and contrast. Why in the hell is the free bird able to dream and fly high and keep thinking of other breeze, and is able to claim the sky? Why are these birds, those free birds, from what, day one, the beginning of age, right? I would say from 1610, they've been able to fly high, claim the sky, and think of other breeze to fly. Why have they been able to do that in the cage bird generation after generation? Because you're saying like it's a different situation from Jim Crow to slavery to you name it. But every single generation, there's been cage birds. Why are there cage birds and free birds? Do you know, Lisa? Why some are free and some are in cage?
That's a loaded question that I don't know I can break down in a few minutes, but I can say the cage evolves.
Yeah.
The cage evolves. It's kind of still there, but it evolves, and you mentioning Emmett Till, there's Trayvon Martin, there's all these other people, that's their modern day, that's a modern day Emmett Till, if you will. But I think that the cage just evolves. So it's really, if we take away, yes, as individuals, yes, you can, really move forward. But I think what you're trying to mention, Gabrielle, and correct me if I'm wrong, is more of like the systemic, the society as a whole. How are there disparaging access to different things, resources, and information than others? Some of it seems intentional.
Why is it figuratively and literally speaking, knees are on our necks every single day? And so the cage bird is singing of freedom because they need some freedom. They need some freedom. Poverty is killing us and we need access. And this is Women's History Month. Studies have shown that women are 35% more likely than men to be poor in America. Women, 35% more likely to be poor in America than men.
Does that also mean Black women?
I was just going to say.
It's worse off for Black women, actually. It's
I don't know if I agree with that one. I mean, numbers I can't lie. I don't know the numbers, but.
Do you know why though? Do you have an idea? Would you have an inclination as to why women are more likely to be poor than men?
I don't know if that's true. Because
wage inequality is one of the wage inequalities. It's a study though that was done.
But numbers, when you do studies and stats, sometimes you got to look at the segment that they're pulling from, and the stat, why are they, sometimes there's an agenda around how they place that. And
what about the women that are they better well off than the men that we know?
Yes,
especially the 100%. Black women, I think too. So with me in comedy is very new to me, and but a lot of my Black male counterparts, and just I don't know if it's just joke wise or not, but I'm given more opportunity being a Black female.
So the idea of women being 35% more likely to be poor than men.
I don't think that's true.
Divorce. Usually when men and when you have a couple and there's a divorce, who ended up being in the coupling once there's the uncoupling? Who usually ends up
the guy ends up on some couch somewhere and living in some basement or some other place. You know what I mean?
Because the women
always end up comfortable.
Really, you think so?
No, of course. Think
with
about
the
every situation.
And
How often are women like that? The whole thing of being put out and with the kid, women get catered to. And I know that sounds, as the only guy here, don't beat me up, but think about it. When you have a problem as a woman, right? Whether you're in danger or it's a mechanic thing, and I'm not trying to be chauvinistic. I got a daughter, all these other things, but usually 9 times out of 10, whether you're calling the police or you're going to the mechanic, you call a man to take care of your problem. You know what I'm saying? A man fixes your tire. A man comes and saves you from whatever the danger is. As a guy, you're on your own. You know what I'm saying? So they expect you to figure it out.
Let me ask you, Lamour, do you believe there's a wage disparity in this country? Women do make less money than men?
Do I believe it? I mean, if I don't know the numbers, but I mean, I think it depends on the industry. I think it depends on a lot of factors. Are you talking about women who have families who've decided to take time off to raise their kids?
No, women who are working the same jobs as men.
No, but it's never.
Who are getting paid, who are discriminated either vertically.
Yeah, I haven't seen that with my own eyes. I think when all things are equal, women actually do better in my world that I've seen. They excel, they move up the ladder, they're more productive, they're more organized, they can multitask a lot better, so they end up getting rewarded. Think about it. But think about it real quick, because in that theory, right? If women make less, and that's what's going on, let's say you're an owner, wouldn't you just hire more women? If you can pay women less, you
would think, but there's a systemic reason why women are being paid.
No, but if that was the case, you would just hire more women to save more money. The bottom line would be the the concern.
Well, there are laws against certain vertical discrimination.
I don't mean to interrupt. I would agree with you that that makes logical sense. I totally agree with you, but I come from the tech space and I can tell you, even if the guy may not be as organized, may not even have to work as hard, he definitely makes the same, if not more, than the woman for the same role, even though she's doing.
Are you comparing white man to black women?
No, I'm just saying in general. So if I had to do it, it's technically the white man makes the dollar, and then I think the black man makes 85 cents to 90 cents on the dollar for the black man, and then it's the white woman, and then it's the black woman for the same role, same level of education, for the same job. So
yeah, you go to a job. Yeah, you go to a job, you have multiple degrees.
Yeah.
That has been my experience. You have multiple degrees and they'll hire someone with a high school diploma to be your boss.
I'm
just pay him more money than you.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be your outliers and your exceptions.
No, it's not the outliers.
I don't know if this is the case across the board.
It's systemic. It's institutional racism.
No, but you got to be careful when you say that, because sometimes it's just not true, right?
Well,
like just because no. Let me explain. Like, for example, and I mentioned it, Emmett Till. There's so many police brutality stories, but you know how crazy. And even though this is public here, it's gonna live forever. But do you know that for every police brutality case that you see, like whether it be George Floyd, like each one of those cases, and I'm not exaggerating, there's a comparable case that a white person had. Like there's a white person who died from being choked.
No, we know that. But like, they didn't go to slavery. There are a lot of
but what I'm saying is wait, real quick. So here's the thing is, there's a like movement, and like there's currency.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's currency. There's like a movement to be made. There's money to be made to like push the victim agenda, like to push the like the oppression, the slavery story. Like there's like the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons. They make millions just spewing the fact that we're all oppressed and victims. And from our lens, the way it's marketed to us, it seems that way. But oftentimes, and it doesn't mean that we're not. Don't get me wrong. I've been pulled over and followed in stores all the time. I mean, every Black person has that same exact story. But when you make it seem like that is the narrative and that is the only identity that we have,
it is the narrative.
It's part of the narrative. It's not the whole narrative.
Yeah, it's the reality that many.
No. It's not the one we have to accept.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the distinction we have to make is that when we are part of maybe perhaps a segment of the population where we've been privileged, our narratives, our stories are definitely different than your average person who has not been as privileged, right? So perhaps because of the access that you've been granted, Lamont, because I know your mom is an educator.
Yeah, well,
middle class. Let me finish.
Okay.
She's middle class and she's done so much.
Yeah, she's worked hard. I'm definitely privileged and blessed. I agree.
And perhaps you're not familiar with the struggles.
No, I am. So let me give you an example, right? Like Dorothy, coming from Houston, I grew up like Jay Prince to me was a hero or is a hero, right? And I don't know what he's like from someone who like, from the Texas, but to me, he represented Black excellence, right? He represented entrepreneurship, starting his own label and making something out of nothing. And that's Houston. So to me, that's my perception of what, Rap-A-Lot, Scarface, like that's what that represents to me. So when I hear you say that there wasn't access, people didn't know, everyone was in this cage, it seems like there's like a tale of two stories going on. And the thing is, the biggest thing in that we have to always remember, two things can be true at the same time.
Correct.
Right?
So remember that. Yeah.
While someone can be oppressed, they also can be privileged and vice versa.
Of course.
So while there can be sort of a lack of opportunity, and there can also be a lot of opportunity, and it's just a matter of how you see it and what you're targeting.
Yeah. I love the idea of it's all in the mind, because over and over again, we know it's not in your mind. It's not in your mind. It's the reality of so many people who are living their reality of oppression, right? Every
So
single
can you
day.
give me an example of concrete oppression right now?
Housing, for example, right now in Boston, I don't know if you know what's going on in Boston.
Who's being oppressed via housing?
The working class. They cannot afford.
But when you say oppressed, what does that mean?
They're not able to afford it. It's a lack of resources, not having enough money. Even though they're working multiple hours or multiple jobs, they're not able to afford the rent that's being pushed down their throat, basically. So we have families right now who cannot. If you go to any major university in the United States or in Boston, you'll see who's below oppressed. How many of us do you see at the higher learning institutions? Right?
The president of Harvard, I forget her name. I think
exception to the rules. But what I'm saying, like,
no, but you see what I'm saying? The narrative part. So
Oprah is the billionaire, but do we have billionaires?
No, but
so listen, we have to understand that
it's starting to become a thing, right? I think that after we have been oppressed for so long, I feel like the pandemic really put people in a state where it's like, all right, to sit down and really think about what's happening right now, and what direction do we want to move ourselves forward, and whether it's as individuals, whether it's as collectives. So I get Vanessa, what you're saying in terms of like doing the work, right? But also Gabrielle, you said there is this systematic oppression, right? But if you don't have access to education, if you don't have access to these things, you are going to continue to be in this poverty or this poverty mindset. So I get from both sides, because I have myself had to, like, I came from Texas. I've had it rough. My mother died, my father died. They were both in poverty. They didn't leave us with anything, which shows that they weren't in poverty. I have nothing. So I'm starting from scratch, as an individual to build these things. And like Gabrielle was saying, like, you wouldn't know, right? Because your mother has worked so hard to be able to provide.
No. My grandmother was on welfare. You know what I'm saying? So my mother was on welfare as a kid. So I get that there's a cycle. Like I get that this happens.
Generational wealth was not that.
All I'm saying, my only kind of like thesis or whatever you want to call it is that just because you start there doesn't mean you have to end there. That's all I'm saying. So
if they'll just open the cage, guess what? People like me, we're smart enough to know how to fly. We are eagles. We can fly. We were born to fly. But if you are an eagle and you are being put enough gauge, guess what? It doesn't matter how hard.
But I think the bigger issue is that sometimes as eagles, some eagles hang around with pigeons. And I think that's the bigger problem. And so instead of flying and being up, they're on the floor like doing peanuts when their wings
are clipped and their feet are tied.
Right, but it's a cycle. People put these things. People put these peanuts. They throw these birds. Right? How many times you've seen people feeding the pigeons and the birds? Right? Because these are things that they like. Right? But it's systematically is what we're trying to say. And I agree. We don't have to stay there. But still, me as someone who's a working single mother, right? I've made decisions. I'm elevating. I'm moving forward. But then there's always something, right, that's continuing. Whether it's education, me improve my education. Whether it's like food insecurities. Whether it's rent. Like there's so many things that contribute to it. But you wouldn't understand it or know it unless you have actually gone through that, right?
And I'm sorry, and maybe I don't mean to be insensitive. I'm not
take you to a few places, Lamont.
No. I'm not saying oppression. No. Yeah, I'm not, like, I think it's obvious that oppression exists. I just try to like put it in perspective
Right.
of how much of it is external versus internal. And I'm kind of, all I'm saying, don't beat me up, is that I'm arguing that I think it's more internal than external. You know, so that's why I ask, if when you say examples of oppression, you're saying, okay, rent, prices. All right. So though, does that mean that we got to live a little further out? You know what I mean? Does that mean other things? Because I mean, we can't live in Dubai, right? Most of us aren't living in Dubai, so we don't move there. New York City, there's some places that are just expensive, and Boston happens to be one of them.
Why are they expensive though? We need to start asking the question.
No,
And
because-
also we need to start asking the question as to who has right to the city.
Yeah. Yo, if you want to live in Springfield right now, or Fall River, or you know, there's
no jobs here. So we got even further.
You can't have it all.
But the thing is, but if you move further out of the city, right? Because all the cities has everything that's local commute. Like for me, I'm like, I live in a city where I don't need a car. Then I would have to move out of the city where I'm going to need a car. That's more money that I'll have to come out of pocket for, that I probably don't have. And if I do, then I have to worry about the maintenance of the car. Why is it so expensive to live inside the city?
Yeah. Well, listen. So Dorothy, you're I guess living proof that you had to get out the nest in order to figure that out, and you had to take risk. You had to, you know, there's some sacrifice there. Dorothy, Gabriel, I'm pointing and then I'm saying, you know, you got on an airplane and left of a hot tropical, you know.
No, I didn't leave. I was displaced. Let's use the proper language. I was displaced out of my country. Just so many people are being displaced out of the city that they love so much, that they grew up in, and they were raised in, and they worked hard to make better.
But what I mean is not everybody, some people stayed, right? Not everyone left. So there are some people
stayed because they couldn't leave.
Yeah.
Just like you say, like move out of another state. How can you move to another state if you have medical condition?
No, okay, but listen. Life isn't fair for everybody.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like everyone has their levels.
Fair for the free bird. The free bird gets to fly and take off another.
No, but you don't know who the pre-bird's mother was, what conditions they had.
Got access to
what cage? No, but you don't know what cage they came out of, right?
No, they got access though.
What egg they came out of.
They were able to.
Dorothy, I don't know how old your child is, but their story is going to be a lot different from your story.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? And you know, so like there's an evolution that happens.
Right.
So
but when the cage bird was sitting on the back of the bus, the free bird got to sit in front of the bus. When the cage bird was not able to get certain jobs in government contracts, the free bird got certain jobs in government contracts.
But what I'm saying is
when the free bird was able to go to university and not be pushed away or denied access, the free bird and grandfather, grandmother, all of them got access. In addition to when it was time to buy housing.
Listen, every day right now, you just do a search on the internet. Every day, you'll see an elderly person who's 70, 80 years old graduating college. Every day, you'll see somebody missing arms, missing legs, and they're running marathons and they're doing certain things. I get it. There's always going to be struggle. There's always going to be some level of like, I didn't have it well. I mean, Dorothy, I you know, condolences that you lost parents. Like, I don't know what I would be if, you know, the fact that you're still standing and you can even do comedy and make light of certain situations. I would be in a hole somewhere just crying to myself, as much of a mama's boy I am. So I definitely, you know, understand struggle. I'm not being like apathetic or like insensitive to like struggle. I just think that if we harp on it too much and we focus on how bad things are and how negative things are, it's going to keep perpetuating that.
No,
you know what I'm saying? So when we talk about being oppressed, I'm like, is this a daily thing where you're just like, you wake up and suddenly the oppression air starts to rain on you?
Some people it is.
I feel like
it is, my friend.
I feel it. I go up the street where I stay, it's like, just in the neighborhoods, the streets are full of trash, right?
No environment.
I'm saying surface lava with trash and stuff, playing hopscotch with spit. I don't know if I'm going to COVID, gingivitis, like, you know, and it's just one of those things where I'm just like, if I go into another community, their community is way cleaner. You know, they have trash pickup, they have street cleaning throughout, you know, so it is a lot that goes on, like, you know.
Yeah, it's every day. For some
I feel like that is oppressing us, because then it's just kind of like one of those things where, all right, I got to wake up to this every day. You know, how is that supposed to motivate me to want better at this the community that I live in?
Yeah. And if you had to study in that environment, like how are you going to open up a book and do other, I get it. So
you mentioned the island that I left. The island that I left when I was a child was an island that I loved. And I remember waking up, getting dressed at 7 o'clock in the morning, walking down the street to my school and spending time with my friends, enjoying. But of course, with imperialism and everything else that came crashing on us, I was displaced out of my country. And now this island is a living hell for the people.
No, but it always was. Okay, so what I would say is it always was. There's no year that it was ever good. It's just, it's the mindset. Events. No, it felt good, but it doesn't mean it was good. It was bad for some people. Because if it was good, you would have never left, right?
No, I'm saying like prior to the chaos that we are seeing here on the news.
It's always been chaotic.
It hasn't always been. Well, how old are you, Vernell? Are you like 30 or younger?
No, I'm not 30.
I'm trying to think here. Because if you're 30 and younger, you would say something like that. It's always been that.
No, you got to tell me what year. Tell me what year. Tell me what year that was. What year was it good?
Oh, well, I'm not gonna tell you my age.
Because no. Okay. So
it was never perfect. We never had perfection because we had the regime, the Duvalier regime that will systemically go after thinkers and those who would stand against him, whatever. And before that, before I was born. But what I'm saying, like, there was a time where I, as a child, could wake up, go to school, and come back home and feel safe. And my parents didn't have to worry about like even locking our doors because we had that level of peace. Listen, there's no perfection here in this country either, but there are communities where people can still get up and go to work and leave their kids home and not have to worry about certain things. There's a level of safety that
but what I'm saying is you're talking about, again, to me, you're about 21, maybe 25 at the most. So
22 and a half.
There we go. You're talking about a dictator was running from the 60s through the 80s.
Correct.
He was under a dictator. Now, if you're telling me and talking about a dictator that killed thousands of people for whatever,
that's like the ones who are here. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, if you're saying that life under dictatorship, on the back of paying reparations and all these other things was a good life, that's definitely see the flip side of how under a dictator you felt life was good.
No, I'm not saying it was good
in a free, or not really free, but a free-ish society where you can talk and do whatever you want. As a woman, you can be whoever you want, right? It doesn't matter what your last name is.
Which society is that?
This one.
Oh, really?
This one. Yes.
Yeah. We need
I
to
believe that.
Some more.
I could be. Call me naive. Call me naive.
No, you're not.
But in dictator Haiti, listen. In dictatorship Haiti in the 60s and 70s, you couldn't have this job right now.
Yeah.
You couldn't speak openly against the president.
I understand. Listen.
You know, you couldn't.
The two are not mutually exclusive. Listen.
Yeah, no, and I agree. Two things can be true at the same time.
Listen, we had a dictator. We know that. We had Duvalier and he was horrible. Those who spoke against him really were disappeared, right? And that was
disappeared.
Yeah, that was the fact.
That's a nice way to put it.
Studying history, that's what I learned. And
disappeared.
What's her name? The Haitian author. She wrote this book called The Dew Breaker. And when I was reading that book, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what happened to those who stood against this divine.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. How can you say it was good?
I understand that.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I asked you what year was it good?
I know, but for
because chances are,
person who was not in politics, who had, your everyday person, like the families who were minding their own business, right, and did not get into politics.
So the people who were actually oppressed.
No. I'm saying like your everyday person. Like right now, I'm an everyday person, I believe, in this country, right? So I'm not looking to do anything crazy. So
No, but you can speak out
can
against
get up
Biden
and
right
go.
now. You can talk up. We all can talk about how we feel about Biden, good or bad, and no one's gonna come knocking at our door.
Correct. So I understand. Well, don't be so quick. I wouldn't say correct so quickly, because
I mean, you
know
can't threaten the guy.
There's a form of safety. There's a form of liberation in this country when people are not truly liberated. But what I'm saying is that I remember the time where I, as a child, and my family used to get up and go to church, go to school, go to the supermarket, do everything that we needed to do, where we didn't have to be concerned about our safety, right? Daily lives. Whereas now we have a total chaos that came up on the country, and that started actually in the 80s. The level of chaos.
It started when they from Africa, when they dropped us off in the boats. That's what it
started. The crime was
no. Yeah. From the beginning, if you kick out Native Americans and then you put a bunch of Africans and you make them work, that's where the problem started. You know what I'm saying? It's never been fixed to this day. Anything you see is just a byproduct of all of that.
But there were moments where we had some. But I'm just saying, like,
it's funny how you're you know the irony. You're so optimistic about the 60s and 70s of Haiti.
No, I'm not.
But the 2000s of America is this dark place.
No. I'm not saying it's a dark. Listen. Pay attention to what I'm saying.
No, you say it's oppressive now.
Listen, we're gonna have to go offline. But let's focus though.
Under a dictator, you don't use the word
oppressed. No. Listen, I said to you, you didn't pay attention.
In a democracy, you didn't pay attention. You're not paying attention.
I am. As a child who was not privy to all that was going on in the country, I felt safe as a child. Now, if I had been an adult, learning and studying and knowing everything that was going on, of course, I would have had a different idea, a different feeling about different feelings about what was happening in the country at the time. But as a child, I felt safe. Just like as a child, you want to walk down the street here in Boston and feel safe. If you don't feel safe, it doesn't matter what's going in terms of politics or anything else. You see what I'm saying?
I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone from Mattapan, but I used to go to Mattapan and feel safe when I was a kid.
No. But it's not about that.
I was on Blue Hill. I didn't know women who were walking up and down the street.
We have to get off pretty soon, but I really appreciate this conversation, because we started with a conversation, to me, that's very serious. And this
it is.
You're talking about lives.
I agree.
This is not a trivial situation. It's not trivial. It's serious business, like my mother used to say all the time. This is serious business. Because people's lives are being impacted. So it's very important that we understand how poverty affects us and everybody else around us. Okay. And we have to become sensitized to the reality of how our neighbors, if we truly are people, this is a country that says one nation under God. If we are a nation that is under God and we want to love our neighbors, we have to think about how they're being impacted on a basis. But how poverty is impacting them and us. Because you know what? We don't live in a bubble. What happens to my neighbors?
It happens to me.
Happens to me too. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to have this conversation tonight. Your mom was supposed to be here, and she said, you know what? Let's have my son here tonight. And oh my gosh. It is.
This is fun. This is fun. Thanks for having us on. This is nice.
Yes, I definitely appreciate it.
It was great having you both, and Lisa had to go, but it was great having you, because I had this show here because I wanted to address certain issues, and I wanted to really challenge our way of thinking, because I think
for sure
many of us have to rethink our position. We're gonna have to rethink, and I think the more exposure, I'm definitely gonna drag you down down Jim. I'm gonna not Jim Collin, but I'm gonna drag him down to see reality of some of your neighbors, neighbors that are not so close to you because you live out there.
No, listen.
But I want to drive you down here. Not drive you down.
Come hang out on Washington.
I would.
Not
I
just
have
driving by.
listen. Look. I'm gonna take you up on that
Yeah,
because
driving by is easy to kind of misunderstand.
no,
You have to
listen.
feel it.
It's it's like the mind's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a powerful thing, and it's like it could be our greatest like weapon and asset or our greatest enemy. And
Correct.
so we have to decide which narrative we're going to choose.
Correct.
Because if dictator Haiti can be a good place, then any place can be a good place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It wasn't a good place, but for me at that time, it was.
And what I'm saying is,
and I wish. Do you know what I wish? I wish at least the young people who are growing up right now had at least that experience. I'm not saying
it was a terrible experience.
I've had that.
Everybody's grandfather had 20 kids with 5 different women. That was what was happening in that time.
And then it happened in the US too. It happened.
Well, but I mean, people can't afford to do that now, or like it doesn't fly as much now.
They still do. But you know, yes, they have you have personal responsibilities. Every single day I get up, I do the stuff that I need to do to take personal responsibility for myself. But at the end of the day too, there are some systemic barriers, and those systemic barriers have held people back. And I wanted to have this conversation today.
Now that's true.
I
don't think anyone will debate that.
Systemic barriers.
Yeah.
We didn't get to answer all our questions, but I think people get the gist of what we're trying to convey here tonight, that you're not alone. There's so many more people who are dealing with the struggles that you're dealing with. The best thing to do, and that's what I'm gonna do for L'Amour, is to bring you out amongst the people. And reality. And then you'll judge for yourself.
I wasn't born. I told you my mother was on welfare. Okay. I'm from an immigrant family. I'm not like, but so I'm just saying while you can bring me there, right? We also have to see where there's achievement happening.
Correct.
Positivity happening.
Correct.
Where people are starting their businesses and getting into, like, I don't know how long you've considered comedy, but the idea of saying, you know what, even though I'm from Houston, I'm going to come to Boston and be this new person. That is amazing. And that story may not be told as much. And maybe because, you're caught up with the day to day. So you're not like thinking of the story and your like progress. But to me, that's an amazing story. Yeah. And I feel like there's more of those kind of stories here as opposed to.
You do have to take initiative.
Right. Yeah.
That initiative has to happen. But again, going back to the systemic, we're not talking about like isolated cases where people are being quote unquote lazy and not taking initiative. We're talking about systemic
as a collective,
structural factors, inequalities that do exist in the world.
Well, you know what?
And we need to address those issues so that
call me crazy. I think being a Black woman is a superpower. Okay.
Of course.
I think it's an asset. I think you have a lot of advantages.
Correct.
And then right after that, I think being a Black man also has that as well.
Of course.
So
that's why we are systemically oppressed.
Listen,
those who don't have anything to offer, right?
I'll let that one, ride.
And while we're here, I will be hosting Tickle Me Tuesdays in Mattapan. But now if you don't hang out, it's the spot to hang out.
Listen,
just leave all personal belongings at home. I would suggest to bring them in your car.
Listen,
in the parking lot.
I'm good on any block. I'm good at any block.
But 9:00 hosting. We got 2 talented Detroit women comedians that are going to be there.
You're going after what's his name? Gates. What's his name? Something Gates.
Jonathan Gates. That's Jonathan Gates. That's tonight.
Are you going after his market? Are you trying to see how women are taking over?
But it's like so. I mean, why wouldn't I? I'm a Black woman. I want to be able to build those. I want to be able to build my fan, So
no, listen. I applaud it, and I will be there. This is on record. But this is just another example of me trying to tell you when I hear oppression, but then I hear you're starting a new night and having people from out of town. It's hard for me to believe the oppression narrative. That's all.
Yeah.
So now if you're
It's
saying
hard to
they're,
believe it if
you're
you haven't-
saying, no, you're saying that they're closing some doors, but
Yeah.
we shouldn't be wanting those doors. We should be opening, creating our own
Own
doors.
doors. This is
Yeah,
And,
okay.
true.
and I
this-
think if we look inwards within our own little community, we have way more. There's an
Yep.
abundance
Yep.
of resources.
Yep. Yep.
That and again, because I do market, like restaurants are opening and they're all run by women. There's but anyway.
Yeah, that's like another story, because when you're saying opening the doors and me just being a Black woman in this space and stuff, and it's really catered to a lot of white people, because when I come into these spaces, like most times I did a show in New Hampshire and I'm the only Black person in the room, so my jokes are always starting off like damn, I'm adding like some seasoning or some pepper to this salt farm, so it's just always those things. But in my journey in comedy, and my hopes is to be able to open up more doors and opportunities for women of color. I know that there was a young Black girl that came to one of the shows, and she was new and it was her first time. She did amazing, but I can tell that she was like feeling a little out of place and awkward, and maybe feeling like, oh, the audience wasn't receptive to them because they probably view her like, oh, well, that's ghetto, or that's that. I've actually had someone say to me like, oh, what I appreciate about you is that you aren't like, you're not ghetto. And I was like, well, you've never seen me drunk before. So like, I'm from Houston, Texas. Like,
Well, the other thing is, why is that a bad thing?
What?
Right?
It's not a bad thing, but why would it be? What's ghetto to you, by the way?
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. What is what does that mean?
Exactly. And I was just offended because he was like, you're not ghetto, but it was just like, what's ghetto to you?
But you got to read between the lines. But that's another story.
I feel like we have the after party that we usually have once we go off the line. Online here. So I'm gonna have to hang up. But again, thank you so much, young man, Vanel, for being on the show.
Old man V.
Yeah.
Dorothy here on the
Nice
show tonight.
meeting you, Vanel.
We're trying to bring in the comedy.
Yeah, I didn't get I gotta get that info for the Tuesday. Let me know what
that
is.
But don't hang up. I'm gonna go offline. Don't hang up.
Okay.
We're gonna do. Thank you.
All right. Bye, world.
Bye. We're gonna go off and we're gonna share this live. Maybe we're gonna just to edit it and get rid of some of the extra stuff. And then it's gonna it's already live, but
we're gonna edit out everything Vonell said.
No. For now, you're good, okay? You're fine with me. We just need to will you in a little bit more. Bye. Have a good night. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.